There's a really interesting tradition of eye research here in Trinity College Dublin, and I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes describing some of this to you. You may find it fascinating. If you could see the inscription on the top of this little old building here, it would read St Mark's Ophthalmic Hospital. We're on the very site of that hospital, which was founded in 1848 by William Wilde, Oscar's father, believe it or not. He was a very well-known and eminent ocular surgeon and physician. And here is actually one of William's prescriptions. Atropine sulfate, the eye drops to be used daily, signed by Wilde. And here we have a lovely portrait of William. But a long time before that, back in 1819, Arthur Jacob, a physician here in Dublin as well, who lectured in our medical school, was the first person to describe a membrane at the back of the eye, and he described it as the most beautiful specimen of a delicate tissue which the human body affords. I think that's a lovely explanation. And of course, he was describing the retina for the first time. And for many, many years, the retina was known as membrana Iacobi, Jacob's membrane, after the discovery of Arthur Jacob back in 1819. Now, what all parts of the eye, unfortunately, as we're only too aware, cornea, lens, vitreous, choroid, all parts of the eye are susceptible to disease, basis of disease. But it's those diseases which involve degeneration of the retina, which are the most prevalent causes of visual handicap in the young and in the working age and in the elderly population, not only in this country, but basically in all developed parts of the world. And all of these conditions, for example, prominent or Leber congenital amaurosis, LCA, retinitis pigmentosa, RP, age-related macular degeneration, AMD, all of these diseases, they're common. We all know somebody with AMD, for example. They have a major genetic component. So 35 years ago, back in the mid-1980s, with the support of a very active charitable foundation, RP Ireland, Fighting Blindness, the group here began to start asking if they could localize and characterize genes involved in these degenerative eye conditions. The rationale, of course, was the more we learn of the function of these genes, the more chance we may have in developing therapeutics. And so that research began in '85, and the first gene to be identified was in 1989, encoding a substance called rhodopsin, a second gene in 1991 encoding peripherin, and a third gene in 1993 encoding inosine monophosphate dehydrogenase 1. What a mouthful. So these genes, there was a worldwide effort to identify the genetic components associated with these conditions. And at this stage, our knowledge is profound. We have a great knowledge of the genetic basis, which puts us in a very advantageous position to now start saying, how can we exploit this? How can we develop therapeutics based on this knowledge? Of course, developing therapeutics is a different ballgame. It requires IP, intellectual property. It requires commercial activity. So it's a far different game to doing pure research. One of the major developments was the establishment of a spin-out campus company, Genable Technologies, which was based around IP conceived and developed by my colleagues Jane Farrer and Paul Kenner and other colleagues, in which a gene therapy targeting dominant forms of inherited retinopathy were being developed. That company was acquired by Spark Therapeutics, the Philadelphia gene therapy company, in 2017 for further development. I was very fortunate to be involved in some of the work of Matt Campbell and Sarah Doyle. They made a remarkable discovery in the field of age-related macular degeneration. People with this disease develop yellow debris in the central part of the retina. We call this drusen. And they were able to show that drusen actually is protective in AMD. It has a protective function in that it can induce a substance called IL-18, which is potently anti-neovascular, and neovascularization is a major cause of pathology in AMD. I think there are profound therapeutic implications in that work. A more recent spin-out was the company Exhaura, in which Matt Campbell and Jeff O'Callaghan had major input into. And this company was spun out of the ocular genetics unit out of IP which emanated from an advanced ERC grant targeting treatment-resistant glaucoma. You might say, well, hang on, glaucoma is treatable, isn't it? You just use eye drops, pressure-reducing eye drops. Well, it's true, but 7%, actually maybe even 10% of people with this disease become resistant to conventional eye drops or don't respond. So there's a need there for more efficient means of treatment of this disease, and glaucoma is a major sight-threatening disease. At least 250,000 people in Europe, for example, are resistant to current medications. So I'm delighted to see that development happening. I'm also very pleased that in a small pilot proof of concept phase 1 study, we now have patients in Ireland who have advanced RP of a specific genetic subtype, which are responding to an oral retinoid therapy, improving their visual fields. I think that's a really interesting development, and I look forward to how that will develop and expand in future years. It's obviously impossible in the time available to acknowledge all of the names of all of the people who are involved in this project, but I would like to acknowledge the support and help of Dr. Marion Humphries, who was involved in this project since its inception, so thank you very much, Marion. And well, it's been a very interesting 35 years, in fact. Very interesting, and it's been a privilege for me to have been able to work with such a dynamic and dedicated group of good individuals. It's been an absolute pleasure to be involved. And I'm very, very honoured, of course, to have received this Lifetime Award. I'm very humbled to do that. And of course, it's a team effort. It's a complete team effort, and I have been delighted to have been able to have provided some assistance in the development of these projects. And I'm certainly very, very glad. I would not have done anything else. I'm very glad that I've been able to participate in this area over the many decades, and I will continue to maintain such an interest as I sail my boat off into a calm sunset, perhaps in the not too distant future.